Today I'm reviewing the INNOCN 49 inches curved ultrawide gaming monitor 5120x1440, 120 Hz. If you want to check current pricing or availability, it's linked below. I've been using this display on my desk for gaming, productivity, and media over several weeks, not just glancing at specs, but in real-world day-to-day use. Let's set expectations clearly. This is a 49-inch ultra-wide monitor with a 32:9 aspect ratio and 5120x1440 resolution. It's designed to replace dual monitors with a single seamless panel and give immersive horizontal space. It's not a compact desktop screen or a traditional 16:9 panel. It's very wide, curved, and aimed at multitasking and immersive content. In everyday use, the first thing you notice is the workspace. Having what feels like two 27-inch displays side by side without a bezel gap makes multitasking easier. I can fit code editors, browser windows, and chat apps all at once without constantly switching contexts. For creative workflows or spreadsheets, that horizontal room feels genuinely useful. Gaming on this panel at 120 Hz feels smooth. It's not the highest refresh available, but motion through fast games still feels fluid and responsive compared with standard 60 Hz panels. Competitive shooters and fast racing titles feel comfortable, there's less motion blur and the action feels more connected to inputs. The curvature, R1800, adds a sense of wraparound presence. In movies and games that support wide formats, the edges feel more natural and less disconnected than flat ultrawides. It doesn't feel distracting. It feels like your field of view gently fills with content. Color performance, rated at 99% sRGB and HDR400 support, leans toward balanced and punchy rather than purely cinematic. For everyday viewing in games, colors pop without being oversaturated. HDR400 doesn't deliver deep HDR contrast like very high-end HDR displays, but highlights feel brighter than typical SDR content, and darker areas retain reasonable detail. Built-in USB-C with power delivery, HDMI, and DisplayPort make connectivity practical. USB-C lets you connect a laptop with one cable for video and peripherals, which simplifies desk setups. DisplayPort and HDMI support higher bandwidths for gaming and console use without fiddling with switches. Now let's talk limitations honestly. The 120 Hz refresh rate is solid and smooth in practice, but it's not ultra-high refresh like 165 Hz or 240 Hz. If you're chasing every frame advantage in competitive esports genres, that's something to weigh. In most games it feels fluid, but peak competitive players may notice the difference versus higher refresh panels. HDR400 is a mid-tier HDR certification. It improves brightness and gives an edge over basic HDR implementations, but it's not on par with higher-end HDR 600/1000 displays that can deliver deeper peak brightness and more dynamic range. In real use, HDR content looks better than SDR, but the effect isn't dramatic. Because of the very wide aspect ratio, vertical space feels shallower than a tall 16:10 panel. If your workflow relies on extensive vertical stacks, long documents or code windows, you'll trade height for horizontal space. That's a characteristic of ultrawides, not a flaw in this panel specifically, but it's something you notice daily. Uniformity on large panels can vary. In most content it isn't distracting, but static UI backgrounds or large uniform gradients can show slight variations in brightness or tint across the wide field, subtle, but perceptible if you stare at solid colors. Deep black levels and contrast aren't on the level of high-end OLED. This is an LCD with backlight, so crushing blacks in very dark rooms won't match more advanced panels. Still, it feels punchy and capable for gaming and everyday use. Compared with dual monitors, this setup avoids bezels and gives a contiguous field, which is one of the core benefits in practice. Compared with 16:9 single monitors, the horizontal space is meaningfully larger and feels immersive for compatible content. Who this makes sense for? If you want immersive gaming with a wide field of view and a smooth 120 Hz experience,